So have you ever signed a player that ranked really highly across a number of key defensive stats, only for them to seemingly fall apart after you sign them? It may not be the case that they're underperforming, they just aren't as busy anymore. And that's where possession adjusted stats come in. In the FMDataLab Moneyball tool, you can now adjust a player's stats based on how much of the ball their club sees compared to your club, giving you a clearer picture of how they might perform in your system. Let me explain. Think of it this way, a player can only pin a tackle, make a block or interception when their team does not have the ball. So if their team has a low average possession, they've got more opportunities to rank up defensive actions. On the other hand, if their team is actually controlling possession, they're spending most of their time passing around rather than defending. The same goes for attacking output. A player can't exactly rack up assists and goals if their team's chasing shadows the whole game. Unless the other team is max fixing and kindly walking the ball in their own net, I'm guessing that's not a regular feature in your save. With this new feature, you can adjust a player's stat values based on how much possession their club has on average, and how that compares to your own club's average possession. Basically shifts things from a raw output to a more level playing field, putting things into context so you can make smarter decisions and avoid that one striker who looks world class but has been stat padding in a team that never leaves the opposition half, where if they actually joined your lower possession club, for example, they would look out of sorts as they would not be on the ball as often. Let's say you're looking at a player who plays for a team that dominates possession more than your club does. Their defensive stats like key tackles, clearances, pressing, etc. will be increased because in your setup they'll be spending more time off the ball and in theory will be asked to do more defensive actions than they would at their current high possession club. But, and this is the trade-off, their attacking stats, that's stats like goals, assists, key passes, will actually get reduced. This is because they would likely see less of the ball in your team than they do at their current club. Now let's flip it the other way. If they're coming from a team that has less of the ball than your club typically does, their attacking stats get a nice little boost due to having more of the ball, so there's more chances to make things happen. And their defensive stats take a bit of a hit because your team should be doing less defending overall. These adjustments don't just help smooth out the numbers, they give you context. They let you see how a player might perform in your tactical environment, rather than just in their current club, which, let's be honest, is pretty essential if you're trying to avoid signing that centre back who has lots of tackles per 90, who only looks good because his midfield lets the opposition stroll through every 5 minutes. Right, let's look at a quick example in the Moneyball tool. Let's say your club sits bang on the average possession mark of 50%, and using a data set from the end of the English Premier League season. I've already plugged in the average possession values for every team in the league using data from the end of the season. But before we bring in the clever bits into play, I'm going to turn off the possession adjustments. That way we're just looking at the raw, untouched stat values. Now take a stat like key tackles per 90. Straight away, the top performers are dominated by players from teams who typically spend most of the match without the ball. Makes sense really. Less of the ball means more defending. Now over to an attacking stat like XG per 90, and you'll notice it's mostly players from high possession sides that are leading the pack. Again, this is no surprise. The more the ball lives in the opposition half, the more likely someone's getting into good scoring positions. Okay, now let's flip the switch and apply the possession adjustments. This is where the calculation kicks in. Everything is now scaled to fit your club's reality of 50% possession. Essentially, acting like every player here is now playing in a team with 50% possession. And looking back at the key tackles per 90 stat, things have changed. Players from high possession teams now climb the ranks a bit. Why? Because in our club, where they'd have less of the ball than they're used to at their club, they'd be expected to defend more. So their defensive stats get a bump to reflect that added workload defensively. Meanwhile, players from teams with less possession than ours start to drop off, because if they move to our club, they'd be spending less time defending than they do now, so those numbers come down. And the same thing happens with XG per 90, the attacking stat. Players from low possession sides who might have been further down the list now start climbing up, because in our system, where they now get more of the ball than they would do at their lower possession club, their attacking stats are boosted. They'll have more time the ball, so they have more chances to get into scoring positions. Now, the closer that a current club's possession is to our club's possession, which is 50%, the less their stats will change. Without any sort of adjustment based on possession, defenders in low possession teams tend to look like defensive monsters. Not necessarily because they're better, but simply because they're busier. They're defending more, so naturally their numbers will pile up. Let me give you a real world example. This one's from Liverpool's 4-1 win over Ipswich back in January. Liverpool had 70% possession this game to Ipswich's 30%. Calvin Phillips ended up with 2 tackles, 3 blocks, 6 interceptions and 6 clearances. That's a total of 17 defensive actions. Now let's look at Virgil van Dijk for Liverpool. He managed only 1 tackle, no blocks, no interceptions and just 2 clearances. That's only 3 defensive actions. Now, does that mean that Calvin Phillips is a better defensive player than Van Dijk? No, and I don't think anyone would really argue that. It just means that Phillips had far more opportunities to defend. And that's exactly what possession adjusted stats aim to solve. They bring a bit of fairness to the numbers by asking, what if this player was in a different team with a different amount of the ball? So, like with most good ideas, they come with a few trade-offs worth keeping in mind. For example, the numbers are tied to a club's average possession, and by average I mean the broad season-long figure. That means it's not capturing those little moments that break the mould, like when a team that usually dominates the ball ends up having to park the bus against a stronger opposition, and if a player sneaks in with a goal during one of those rare scraps for possession, that goal will still get adjusted like it happened in their usual high possession setup, which might knock off a few points unfairly. Especially if your club tends to see a lot less of the ball, it would get more unfairly punished. Another thing worth mentioning is whenever you use the Moneyball upload feature, that when you upload multiple seasons of data, let's say in your data set there is a player that has been at the same club for just say 2 or 3 years, that club's possession can shift quite a bit, especially due to promotion or relegation, where their possession could vary widely. But the adjustment only uses 1 possession value for the whole club over all those seasons. Also, quite an important one, the possession data needs to match the timing of your player list export. If you export your list in June at the end of a season, then decide to grab the possession values from the mid-season transfer window in January the following year, you're probably mixing apples and oranges. The player data might not reflect how their club is performing now, so it's always best to grab both the player data and the possession info at the same time. Now, a big one, sadly, Football Manager doesn't give you a lovely one-click export for club possession values, so you'll have to enter those numbers manually, one club at a time. Yes, I know it's a bit of a slog, especially if you've got a large data set, and if you're like me, and you can't be trusted not to mistype a number, there's always a small risk of getting something slightly wrong via manual entry. Also, possession data is only available for the leagues you've actually loaded into your save, so if you're scouting a player from a club in an unviewable league, you won't be able to apply any possession adjustment at all. That means your dataset might have some gaps and your shortlist might end up a bit skewed, depending on how broad your player list is. Now, before I get into the boring, nerdy number stuff, I thought I'd now just go over how to use the feature in the Moneyball tool and cover the nerdy stuff at the end for those interested. Alright, so let's talk about how you actually get the club's average possession figure first. You'll need to grab this info straight from Football Manager itself. And just like I mentioned before, possession data is only available for leagues that you either have set as playable or viewable in your save. To find a club's average possession, first head to the league that club plays in. The easiest way is by searching for it by its name or clicking the name of the league via a club's page. Once you're in, hover over the Stats tab at the top. From there, choose Team Overview. Then click the average possession title in the relevant section. It may be in a different location if you're using a custom skin, but hopefully you'll be able to find it either way. You should now see a list of all clubs in the league with their average possession percentage shown in the average possession column. Now, as I also mentioned before, unfortunately, exporting from this page is not functional. If you try the in-game print option, it'll reward you with a blank HTML file for your troubles, so cheers FM. So yeah, for now, it's a case of entering these figures manually. Bit of a pain, I know, sorry. Alright, with that out of the way, let's get into how you actually add your first club possession value. There are 3 main ways to get started, depending on how you want to handle things. First up, the more traditional route is to click the Club Possession button at the top of the page. That'll open up the Add Club Possession dialog, where you can manually assign a possession percentage to any club listed in your HTML file. This method is perfect if you want to handle multiple clubs at once. Second option is if you're already browsing the Moneyball table and you spot a club who hasn't yet been given a possession value, in the club column you'll see a little plus icon beside the club name. Click the icon and it'll open up the Add Club Possession dialog, but this time the club dropdown will already be filled for you based on the selected club. The third option is almost identical to the second option, but this time you do it from the new possession column. If a player's club doesn't yet have a possession value, just click that little plus icon again inside the possession cell. That'll pop open the same dialog again with the club already selected for you. So once you're in the Add Club Possession dialog, you'll find a button labelled My Club Possession. Clicking that will pop open a little window with a number input, where you can enter your club's average possession percentage. You can enter any number between 0 and 100. Clicking the Save My Club Possession will save this value within your browser to be used across all uploads. It will also re-trigger a recalculation of Moneyball data. Also in the Add Club Possession dialog, you will see the Add Club Possession button. This adds a fresh new entry to the list, unless you got to the screen by clicking the icon from the table. In that case, a new entry will already be selected for you, ready to be edited straight away. Once you begin the process of adding a new club's possession, you will see a small form. First, you have the club dropdown. This lets you choose which club you want to give a possession value to. Now, the list of clubs in that dropdown isn't just a random list from FM's database. It's pulled directly from the clubs in your uploaded HTML file. Also worth noting, any club you've already given a possession value to, that'll be hidden from the dropdown, so you don't accidentally overwrite something or start entering the same club twice. Now, for the possession input, this is where you actually set the average possession for the club you've selected. Once you're happy with all your changes, just hit the Update Club Possession button at the bottom of the dialog. If you don't do this, your entries won't be saved. Clicking this button applies your inputs and kicks off a full recalculation across the Moneyball tool. Every player from every club you've added will now have their stats re-evaluated based on the difference between their current club's possession and your own. So if you want to remove a club's possession value you've previously set, just click the little bin icon next to the club's name. Alternatively, there's also a Delete Club Possession button inside the body of the entry itself. Now once you've deleted an entry, a bit like adding one, you'll also need to confirm that change by clicking the Update Club Possession button. That'll apply the updates and recalculate all relevant stats across the Moneyball tool. You can also go full scorch surf and click the Delete Club Possessions button. That'll remove every club possession you've entered so far in one fell swoop. So if at any point you fancy switching off all the possession adjusted stats and just want to look at the raw unaltered metrics, the good old fashioned way, you can do that by clicking the Hide Club Possession button above the Moneyball table. That tells the system to completely strip out all the adjustments I've been talking about. This can be handy if you want to compare the before and after effect of the possession adjusted stats, or if you're trying to double check what was originally there. Alright, let's quickly run through how the Moneyball tool visually flags where club possession is doing its thing. You'll spot a little colour-coded percentage icon all over the place to indicate that some possession-based adjustment has occurred. So first up in the name column in the Moneyball table, if a player's club has a possession value set, there'll be a colour-coded percentage icon next to their name. That colour shows whether the club has more or less of the ball compared to yours. Hover over this icon and you'll get a tooltip with a quick breakdown of possession details and its adjustment impact. In the club column, the name's followed by the club possession percentage in brackets. And yep, it's colour coded again. You also see a little info icon when hovered over gives that same tooltip. Now if you have the possession adjustments enabled, you will now see a new column called Possession. Each cell includes a colour coded badge with the club's possession value within. So if there's no value, you'll see that little plus icon I mentioned, and clicking that will open up the Add Club Possession window. You'll already fill in the club you have selected. So for any of the stat badges within the tool which are affected by possession adjustments, they also have a colour coded percentage icon in the top left corner of the badge. Hovering over the badge expands the usual tooltip to include a bit more possession context, including whether a player's club has more or less of the ball than yours and how it impacts that stat. It will also detail the possession adjusted multiplier that gets applied to that stat. Now if it's a per 90, derived, computed or action stat, the tooltip will also explain which stats are used in the evaluation of the stat were adjusted. And if a league multiplier is also applied too, that'll show up in the tooltip as well. The same goes for anywhere else you find the stat badges like key areas, top 10 stats, statistics sections that you can find in the player info panel or player comparison window. And in the player info panel and player comparison window, any player that is affected by possession adjustments gets the same color coded percentage icon next to their name. Now when you're looking at the comparison radar chart, when hovering over a data line for the selected player, their comparison player, or the top performer in the selected stat, if their club has a possession value, any stat badges in the resulting tooltip will also show a color coded percentage icon, and beside each affected stat, you'll see an actual multiplier that was used in the possession calculation. Now over to the Moneyball chart view, if you hover over any data point in the chart and if that player's stats have been tweaked due to club possession, any stat badges will show that color coded percentage icon too. The same icon also appears beside the club name just to drive the point home. And also in the Moneyball chart view, you can actually pick club possession as one of the axis dimensions, so you can quickly compare club possession levels against any stat you fancy. Possession adjusted stats don't just work on their own, they actually pair really well with league multipliers. Both of these adjust stats, and they can be applied together to reshape a player's numbers, giving you a far clearer picture of how someone might perform at your club, not just how they looked on paper at theirs. So just think about it, you might be looking at a player from a low reputation league where they barely see the ball all season. On the surface, their stats might seem a bit underwhelming, but once you apply the league strength adjustment and adjust for the fact that they were starved of possession, you might find they're exactly what your squad needs. And the reverse can happen too. Someone with glowing numbers might lose a bit of their shine once you factor in that they've been playing in a dominant, high possession side. And these adjustments can be the difference between finding a bargain or making a very expensive mistake. Right then, let's get stuck into the real nerdy bit. How are possession adjusted stats calculated? Well, each stat is recalculated based on your club's average possession compared to the player's current club's average possession. Stats will fall into one of two categories, attacking or defensive. If it helps to think about it another way than simply attacking or defending, as there is a bit of nuance there, just imagine it as in and out possession stats, or think of it in terms of opportunity. Will the player have more or less opportunity to perform that stat based on the difference between their current club's average possession and yours? Not every stat gets adjusted though. Some don't really factor into whether you've got the ball or not, or can occur in both attacking and defensive contexts. The best example of that is header based stats, because FM doesn't really tell you whether that header was to clear a cross in their own box or to stick one in the back of the net from a set piece. A towering centre back might be brilliant in the air, but whether that's at the back or up front, well, who knows. So I can't apply possession logic where we don't know the full picture. You can actually see a full list of which stats are adjusted or not in the which stats are affected by club possession section in the Moneyball tutorial. Let's talk formulas. Don't worry, I'll try my best to explain this. So the general idea is to imagine what a player's stat would look like if that player was dropped into your system with your possession level. This is done by a simple bit of maths that can help scale players' output relative to the difference in possession between the two clubs. So it's actually quite simple. You've got three variables. You've got S, which is the original stat value, PC, which is the player's current club average possession, and PM, which is your club's average possession. Now the formula is different as to whether it's an attacking or a defensive stat. For an attacking stat, where it's S multiplied by the result of PM divided by PC. If it's a defensive stat, flip that, it's S multiplied by the result of PC divided by PM. Now, it's not just the base stats from FM that get adjusted. Since these base values are frequently used as parts of the equation for other derived, per 90, computed, or action stats, once I adjust the base number, anything else that relies on it also gets updated automatically. So one final point, percentage based stats don't get touched. Things like pass completion or tackle win rate, they stay the same because the raw numbers that make them up are scaled together, so the ratio still holds true. So if you're anything like me and you might need to see it written out before it properly clicks, I've added a few examples in the Moneyball tutorial section that break down the formulas for both attacking and defensive stats, depending on whether the player's coming from a team with more or less possession than your own. Hopefully that helps bring the concept to life a bit more and really drills it home. Because, let's be honest, talking about ratios and multipliers only gets so far before the eyes start glazing over. So that's a look at how possession adjusted stats work inside the Moneyball tool, helping you spot which players might actually thrive in your system, not just ones who've been padding their numbers while their teammates do all the heavy lifting. If you found this useful, give the video a like, and maybe subscribe if you fancy more of this sort of thing. There's plenty more to come. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.